So today's a quick one. We're continue on discussing group policies, okay? And obviously, by now we should already know what group policies are and how they are created, how they are managed. But we'll talk about some other things as well today associated with group policies. But the main thing is that there's a second worksheet. Now, hopefully, that'll help you do a few more things. And the goal obviously is before next time I see you, which is for this class next Tuesday, you should be working towards getting your assignment up to the stage where you've done the group policy section. Okay, that ideally what you should be doing is trying to do the worksheets on the practice virtual machine. Okay, I can give you as much help as you need to do that because obviously it's all part of learning. But when you go and try to implement it then in your assignment, that's when it's your work. Okay, I can assess you as in such as I tell you if you're right or wrong, if it's wrong, why it's wrong, and ask you to go fix it. But obviously I'm not going to do it for you. Okay, so group policies. Today we're going to talk about managing user desktop with group policies. And like we mentioned the other day, group policies are an easy, centralized way for us to actually configure the client workstation. Okay, we want to map drives, we want to run a specific script, we want to redirect their folders, we want to have them have a certain desktop image, we want to install software. All those things are possible, as well as thousands of other settings. Okay, like I mentioned the other day, there's no way we're going to go through every setting that is possible, but obviously we're here to give you a start on understanding how group policies work, how to apply them, and just a few example settings. If I were you and I wanted to do something in group policy, first of all, I have to get the idea what I want to do in my head really clear. Okay, this is what I want to achieve. How can I achieve this? Okay, what settings do I need to configure to achieve this at the end of the day? Okay, work that out for you clearly, do a bit of research on those particular settings, and then understand how they get applied. There's been a couple of questions while people are doing their assignment. Should I be putting all the group policies together, or should I be making individual group policies? And obviously at this early stage learning wise, it's a lot easier to actually understand what's going on if you create a separate group policy, a GPO for each setting you want to change. But later on you'll realize that maybe that's not as efficient as it should be. So later on you might think that, hey, I can group a couple of things together because maybe this is all for this purpose. Okay, so maybe if it's a user what's a desktop experience type situation where I want to give them a certain theme, a certain desktop image, stop them from being able to change the TCP IP or not see the recycle bin on the desktop, maybe it's all combined together. If you want to do that, you have to actually look at the requirements. Okay, firstly, the scoping. Remember we talked about scoping last lesson, whereas the scope is who does this apply? Who will get this setting? Obviously, that determines where we put it on the Active Directory hierarchy. If it's for everyone, we put it right at the top of the level, highest level that's possible. So we can cover as many people as we want. And obviously, we spoke about filtering last time as well. So if it's for everyone and all the people that actually we want to be affected by this setting is all over the Active Directory, in that case, we put it at the highest level, but maybe there's people in this Active Directory that shouldn't get it either because there's other types of users. So maybe we can use filtering like we did the other day with groups. Okay. And also, what if it depends on what type of computer they're sitting on? It depends if they're sitting on a computer with Intel CPU or a computer with Windows 7 or a computer with Windows 10, or if they've got 16 gigs of RAM, then we can actually configure the WMI filters. Okay, so basically when all those things match up, the scope and the actual filters match up with all these group policy objects, then you can put it in one. Okay, for example, in the assignment, it tells you to configure a desktop image for everyone except for Evan Zerfel. Okay, so that's pretty much everyone with an exception of Evan Zerfel. Well, then another setting says configure loopback processing. It doesn't say any more, which you can assume or clarify would mean, and that actually means everyone. If you actually combine these two group policy settings together in the same group policy object, and you put the same filtering or the same scoping on that, which means everyone except for Evan Zerfel, it means that Evan Zerfel won't get the loopback processing either. Is that really what you want? And if the answer is no, then you can't put them together. If the answer is yes, then certainly do it. And like I said, at first when you're learning, spreading it out, making one policy object per setting is an easy way to understand the effects, cause and effect of the thing, of the setting. Okay, but as you get more experience and you know how things work and how the cause and effect, you can actually start combining settings into a group policy object that's more for that's got a lot of things in common for a specific group of people. So today we're going to continue on with that, and we're going to look at some administrative templates. We're going to look at folder redirection and scripts, and we're going to configure group policy preferences and use group policies to deploy software. So today's lesson is fairly quick, so let's keep on moving forward. So let's talk about administrative templates first of all. Okay, so what are administrative templates? Administrative templates provide you with the ability to control both the environment of the operating system and the user experience. Okay, so for example, some of the things you can control in the administrative templates, you'll have sections for under the computer for the control panel, the network, the printers, the servers, the start menu, the system, the Windows components. What does that mean? That means pretty much when you go to your computer and you go to a control panel, and some of these sections, all these sections, you can do some sort of settings that affects these settings. For example, right now, I can go in, I can actually turn on, disable the firewalls if I want to, couldn't I? Because I'm a local user and I happen to have the rights to do so. But what if you don't want to give people the rights to be able to disable the firewall? Well, in these GPO settings that are associated with that control panel, you could have a setting that prevents people from changing the firewall status. So if we actually switch over to my example virtual machine, let's have a look at some of these ones. Like I said, we're not going to go through every one of these settings, but just to give you an idea of what's there, let's have a quick look. So if we actually just we'll just take the same group policy object last time that we used, and we'll actually have a look at these administrative templates. So you've got software setting, Windows settings, and you've got administrative templates. And this is where a lot of the useful ones are. So remember we just spoke about control panel. So let's expand that. So here's some things we can do to the control panel. You can force a specific lock screen image. Okay, if you want them to have a different image to what the default Windows image is. You can actually prevent changing the lock screen image. You can prevent changing the start menu background. You can prevent lock screen slideshow. If we look at the networks, TCP/IP settings, parameters. Let's actually go to the user one as well. So some things are done under user, some things are done under computer. All right, so again, programs, we can actually hide programs and features page, which means a person, if you look at the description, a person can't see the programs and features. So basically, a user who's got this controlled for them won't be able to actually add or remove any programs or features that's already installed, okay, through that method at least. Okay, here's let's look at the let's look at the network again. Network connections, prohibit TCP/IP advanced configuration. If we read this actually, if you enable this, the advanced button on the TCP/IP would be disabled, so you can't click on it. And ability to rename the LAN connection settings. So if you want to allow them or disallow them. So there's a whole heap of them. Prohibit to access the properties of the LAN connection. So not even look at the properties, meaning they can't even change it. So, so when you think about this, okay, like obviously for us, that's stuff we need to do in this classroom, isn't it? We need to go in and change our TCP/IP settings sometimes. But if you think for TAFE-SA as an example that we all understand how this network works. There's students, there's lecturers, and for the students, there's different types of students. Let's say for a hairdressing student, I know that's, I'm not trying to put them down, I'm just saying that a hairdressing student is not typically highly technical when it comes to IT. Do you think they should be changing the TCP/IP settings of your network card? Probably not. If they did change it, maybe they'll give them the potential to actually make a mistake, get it wrong, in fact cause more problems than they can actually solve. So maybe for that group of students, you want to implement this. Okay, there's a whole heap of these administrative templates, and they're so very useful because they actually allows us to do so many different things. Okay, so like I said, there's literally thousands of different settings that you can actually go through and have a look. And the best thing is you can click on any one of this, and I don't even know what I'm clicking on here, and there's a description that helps you. But like I said, there's probably not an easy way to go learn about each one of these settings just by clicking through. If I were you, I want to work out what I want to achieve, and if it's possible to achieve it with group policy, and if it is, what are the settings I need to configure and where they are. So I would actually, let's say we want to achieve something like, bear with me, something like how to lock down desktop with GPO. Okay, and that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about with sort of doing a bit of research, because like I said, if you walk through and try to learn about every setting by just clicking on and reading the description, that's going to be annoyingly long. So, but there's always someone else who's had the same experience, someone else who probably wanted to do the same thing. So maybe if I do this, click on this one, for example, you can actually read about it. Doesn't even matter if it's right or wrong at this stage. Read about it, see if it's possible, and if it is right, maybe there's a link somewhere that teaches you how to do something. Okay, and that's what I'm talking about by doing research, not to go through every one of those settings and read the description, but actually use your technical resources like that, the Microsoft Technic site, use forums, ask questions, do a bit, learn from other people's experiences. Okay, I'm sure if you want to do something, someone else probably would have thought of the same thing. And if you're so unique that you thought of something that no one has ever thought of, then you're probably not worth doing. Okay, so with IT, especially with networking and locking people down, there's always someone's already done it before. Why reinvent the wheel? Why not learn from someone else so you can short circuit the learning process? Okay, shortcut the learning process. So here's these are the different sections. Obviously, they relate to different settings that affect different parts of your Windows. And each of these main sections contains many, many subfolders to help you further organize your settings, literally thousands. There's what are ADM and ADMX files? So ADM files are copied into every GPO from the sys volume and are difficult to customize. So basically they are there, and when you create a GPO, they are actually loaded from the sys volume so that you can then edit it. Have you noticed why we always start with those different sections and why all those settings are there, and we actually go in and then change it, don't we? Well, that's because they're loaded from the sys volume. ADMX files include language-neutral ADML files that provide a localized language, are not stored in the GPO, and they are extensible from XML. What does that mean? Extensible. It means you can add to it. Okay, let's say that someone else is, you've got a set of administrative templates that we just spoke about. What if someone like we discussed before, someone had a unique idea and they wanted to do something, and it wasn't possible before, but now someone's actually created that, and it is possible. Well, they could actually create it as an XML file, and you can actually import or grab that and put it into yours, okay, by extending it through the XML. So the central store is a central repository or storage location. That's what a repository is for ADMX and ADML files. It's stored in the sysvol, which is the system volume, and it must be created manually. If detected automatically, is detected automatically by Windows Vista and newer, or Server 2008 or newer. And basically, if you look at this picture, this is you as the administrator. You on your desktop. You have these ADMX files, so basically things that could extend all the settings that you have already, put more in there. You would upload these into the sysvol of the domain controller, and because of the domain controllers all store a copy of these items, they get replicated across to all the other domain controllers. Here's a discussion. We've probably had a bit of this discussion already. So how do you currently provide desktop security? Okay, most of you are students, so you probably have never even thought of it. But if you think about it, I'm sure you guys have all gone to high school. Okay, I'm sure you guys probably were some of those naughty kids that actually did funny things onto the computers and see if you could get away with it. Okay, you probably changed the background image to something that is not necessarily appropriate. You might have experimenting using changing the TCP/IP settings so you could use a different proxy server or different DNS server. Well, if you put your other hat on, now you guys are going to go out and get a job, and you might be the administrators that have to cope with kids that are doing things like that. How do you secure your computers? So what's worse than having computers that with all these students doing funny things is that they could potentially wreck that computer from someone else being able to do regular, legitimate work on there. So how do you secure it? Okay, how much administrative access do you give to users to have to their own systems? Obviously, if the users own their own system, they should have lots of access. Okay, but obviously sometimes too much access means that they can make more problems than anything. Okay, so again, in that school system where you guys were there, if you had too much access, couldn't you be even naughtier? Okay, so there's always this philosophy of least privilege, if you've ever heard of that. If you give them just enough for them to be able to do their work, that's great. Any more they can actually exploit and cause problems or use as not necessarily intentionally, but even accidentally, they could actually cause problems. Okay, which group policy settings do you find useful in your organization? Obviously, as we learn more about this, then you'll probably find that, this one's a good one, disabling them from accessing the LAN properties. Well, at least that means that they can't actually give themselves a static IP address to try to get around our firewall or gateway or proxy server, potentially. So with this is more of a discussion for someone who's already doing this as a job. Okay, but those are just think of, even if you don't have a job, think of your school that you went to. Think of all the naughtiness that students can get up to. Think of what you can how you can prevent them from doing that. If you actually take away their ability to actually even see the add remove programs, can they uninstall that vital program that's on the computer? Not intentionally, not accidentally, not usually. Okay, it doesn't mean that they can't. It means that that's just one avenue that prevents them from doing it through that method. Extending administrative templates. So extending administrative templates by creating new templates or downloading available templates. So like I said, what we got, there's what we got, but what if you want to add more? You can actually extend these. So we can add the templates to a GPO so that the settings become available, and we can then customize these settings and then deploy the group policy object. So just be aware what you need to get out of this slide is that these administrative templates can be extended to add further settings. And the next thing we're going to talk about is folder redirection. So we'll do that in our worksheet, and most of these things that we would go through we'll do in the worksheet, so it'll probably make more sense as you're working through the worksheet. So folder redirection, what the hell is that? It's pretty straightforward. It redirects a folder from here to there. Okay, let's actually dig in a little bit and ask why. Remember what I always say, when I look at a typical user, I think of my mother. Okay, if she had an important document she was editing and she's doing her work and she clicks save, what's the default location your software will ask to save it? Sorry? Documents, my documents, somewhere on your computer here, isn't it? All right, so basically, if my mother being a typical user will just click save, okay, and it'll be here. That's great. But the problem is that's not centralized. And that desktop machine here probably doesn't have any RAID or redundancy. So let's say that that computer fails, her document will be gone as well. Whereas if you're in a work environment, we've spoke in our last subject, we spoke about redundancy, we spoke about RAID, we spoke about backups. It's a lot harder to back up individual client machines than it is to back up a server where all the storage is consolidated, isn't it? So therefore, hey, I don't want to really confuse my mum because she's probably like any other typical office worker, can get really confused if you change the system too much. So how about I actually just let her do what she always does and just click save and goes to my documents. But instead of storing that document on the my documents that's on a local computer, I actually redirect that folder to her home directory that's on the network drive. Remember we talked about home directories the other subject? That's still personal to her, isn't it? A home directory is still personal to her. It's not necessarily a shared drive where everyone can see. It's personal to her. But instead of her files being on the local computer, local hard drive with no backup, no redundancy, it's on the server now. It's on the server now. And so if this computer blew up and she would lose all her work normally, because it's on the server, she just logs onto another machine because of the folder redirection group policy object. Guess what? Her document that she was editing is in her My Documents again. And she can open it up again. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why we could redirect these different parts. So if you don't know where they normally live, they live under your profile. Okay, so let me just quickly show you what I mean by your profile. So everyone who logs onto a machine gets what's called a local profile. So it's usually under users. And if you look at mine, Alex Zhao, you can see that all these things are under my profile. You've got documents, you got downloads, you got videos, you've got various other things, but all of those folders can be redirected somewhere else. Okay, folder redirection is a feature that allows folders to be located on a network server but appear as if they're still local to the user. Folders that can be redirected in Vista and later are as follows. The typical things that are under your profile. The way you can redirect, you can do it one or two ways. You can do it, folder redirection can be configured so that you use a basic folder redirection where all users save their files into the same parent folder. A bit like how we did the home directories last term, okay? That's a basic redirection. So we can use advanced redirection when the server is hosting the folder location is based on group membership. In this case, account users, account managers, and so forth. We can use the follow documents folder to force certain folders to become subfolders of documents. We can also target folder location, so we can redirect a user's home to a user's home directory, like I was describing, for document folder only. We can create a folder for each user under a root path and redirect to the following location, and redirect the user profile to the local user profile. So that's what I was sort of describing just before. Instead of actually going to your documents, which is under your profiles, you're redirecting to your home directory, which might be on your file server. Okay, so like I said, this will probably make a lot more sense when we actually do it in the worksheet. So here are some security settings for folder redirection. Okay, so by default, so the NTFS permissions for the root folder that's containing all the folders that you might be redirecting, or all the people's home directories, the administrator is the creator owner, and the administrator does not have full control to subdirectories, subfolders, and files only. The security group for users that save the data on the share should have list, read, create folder, append data to the folder already, and the system should have full control. The share permissions should be full control, and specifically for each user's folder, just like we spoke about with the sort of the home directory in the template last term, where you can use the %username% to substitute each person's username, and basically they get a folder for themselves, and they themselves get the full control, and the administrator has no control. What does that mean? Because it means that basically those files, because you normally store them on your documents folder, they're personal to you. I mean, it's in a work situation, it's not personal, but it's still not something you're sharing with other people. So therefore, you put it here, you've got full control, but administrators don't. Doesn't mean administrators can't give themselves control, but once they do, you can it's either logged, and then therefore, if something's up, then you can go to logs or someone can go to logs and check it out. The system has full control. Also, scripts. Okay, scripts are not used so much these days because we don't need a script to map drives or do anything like that. But we can still run scripts. Okay, but by default, there's the security settings for scripts is to disable them. Okay, so if you remember back to the 5ICW's lessons when we actually did PowerShell, we had to enable the execution of scripts before they would actually run. So this is the same here. So we have what's called shutdown startup scripts. So basically, as the name suggests, when your computer starts up, it's a computer policy. It downloads the group policy, and there's certain actions you can execute on startup or shut down. For users, there's actually log on and log off scripts. So scripts that you run during log on process or when you're logging off. Okay, and obviously, why would you use scripts? Okay, so you can use scripts to perform many tasks such as clearing page files, mapping drives, or clearing temp folders for that user. And you can do many more. Anything you can put in a PowerShell, you can pretty much make it into a script. But like I said, it's probably not as used as often as in the past, where you would map all the drives and configure a lot of the settings through scripts. Okay, it was a lot harder back in the day because instead of having group policies, you would have to do registry patches. And one of the easiest ways to do registry patches is to script them during logon. Okay, but these days with group policies, a lot of that is taken care of outside of that. Now let's talk about group policy preferences. We spoke about preferences last lesson already. So remember, there's settings and there's preferences. So settings is like a must-have. Okay, if this is a setting, you can disable properties of the network card. That is a must-have. You can't get around it. The user can't get around it. They can't then say yes, I want access and give themselves access. Whereas the preference is like anything, we prefer you to have this, but if you choose not to, that's fine. Okay, so you'll find that some things are preferences and some things are settings. The key difference is that a setting is like a rule you must do. A preference is something that, hey, we prefer you to have, this is what you got, but if you choose not to have it, it's okay. So group policy preferences enables IT professionals to configure, deploy, and manage settings that were not manageable by using group policy. They are natively supported in Server 2008, obviously later, and it can be created, deleted, or replaced or updated. So preferences such as drive mappings can be created, updated, or deleted. So here's some examples. The differences between policies and settings. Policies, like I said, are strictly enforced policy settings by writing the settings into an area of the registry that the user cannot modify. So don't forget, all these group policies, what they're doing is they're actually modifying your registry, if you've ever heard of that. Your registry on a Windows is basically all your settings, okay? So when we do it, the reason why we can't, as users, we can't change these settings is because these settings are being modified in a registry that a user cannot touch, okay? Whereas the group policy preferences are written to a section of the registry where a user can change themselves. Okay, like drive mappings, like desktop image, and so forth. Group policy settings are typically disabled. Typically disable the user interface for settings that group policies is managing. So we can shut off the changing of properties of a network card, for example. Preferences usually do not cause the application or operating system feature to be disabled. The user interface for the setting they're configuring. So they don't disable it, they actually just configure something and then the user is able to then change it after that. With settings, refreshing policy settings at a regular intervals. Okay, with preferences, refresh preferences by using the same interval as group policy settings by default. And do you guys remember what time period that change could be? Sorry? Yeah, 90 to 120 minutes. If you make a change and someone's already logged in, it could take them up to 90 to 120 minutes before the change applies. And what could you do if you wanted to see it apply straight away? Yeah, what do you mean by that? Yeah, GP update / force. Okay, and obviously if it's a user setting, logging off, logging back on. Computer setting, shutting down, starting up. Okay. So features of group policy preferences. So this is quite interesting. Okay, so we could actually use this. Use to configure additional options to control the behavior of the group policy preference. Okay, so for example, there's this targeting feature. Okay, so this actually is like filtering again, but it's another way of doing it. Okay, so in this case, the group is a wireless computers. So instead of actually putting a filter in the scoping area, this is a targeting feature that's inside a preference, and we can actually use it to be more specific to a group of users or computers. Okay, it determines which users and computer preferences items are applied. And to be honest, like, you know how we have to do map drives, you know, the W drive to the department folders, right? We could potentially use this targeting to do this. Okay, for example, the production people would have to map to the production share, wouldn't they? Okay, whereas the office admin people would map to the office admin share. But we can use this targeting or even filtering to achieve this. But this potentially could save you a lot of work. Okay. So targeting can target 27 different categories. Yeah, you can combine different categories together by using or and a Boolean logic. Okay, so if you don't know what that means, you know, if you have more than one target, you can have this as a filter plus this. That's a and. But if you don't care which one they meet, as long as they meet one of the requirements, it's an or. Okay, so if, for example, like we just do just a everyday sort of filter. I might ask you the question: who's a footy fan? Yeah, Aussie Rules footy fan. Maybe some of you guys would put your hand up. Okay, if I was saying, oh, isn't footy great? Yeah, to those guys, that's one thing. But if I go, who's a footy fan? They follow the Adelaide Crows. That would be two requirements, wouldn't they? Okay. Or I could even say, who's a footy fan who follows Adelaide Crows or Port Power? So it doesn't matter which one of those categories, it just captures more people. So obviously this again helps us target or scope who's going to get affected. Instead of using a single category for targeting, you can use multiple categories. Okay, so this is probably the thing that makes this targeting a little bit more powerful than just filtering. Okay, you can actually target different categories. Okay, there's item level targeting is refreshed during the group policy background refresh. All right, what about deploying software? Okay, so let's look at this lifecycle. So basically, we can deploy software with group policy objects, and we'll do Firefox in our class, and that's what you're doing in your assignment as well, funny enough. The first thing we have to talk about is that in order to deploy a software with group policy, that software must have the .msi extension. Okay, it's a Microsoft installer file. Okay, Microsoft installer files, there's a couple of things you should, which makes it really good. It's actually resilient. What does that mean? That means if you've got a MSI file that installed an application, you know, sometimes you can go off and accidentally delete a whole bunch of files because you're running out of space, right? And you delete some of the files for that program, not the MSI file, but the files on for that program. And then normally, if it was just a regular application, that program wouldn't work anymore. But if it was an MSI installation, and you notice that you always keep a whole heap of MSIs on your system, when you double click on the icon that actually starts that program, but it's missing all those files, it will actually go back to the original MSI file and repair itself. Okay. So that's one of the things. Okay, so if you haven't noticed, in your computer, on your C drive, you have a whole bunch of MSI files, okay? Let me see if I can find some. And if you were, sometimes it gets annoying. Oh, I'm running out of disk space. Oh, all these MSI files are taking up so much space. And you're probably tempted to go off and delete some of these MSI files. But if you do delete these MSI files, you'll find that your apps may not work properly afterwards. And what does that mean? That means that maybe when you have a file type it's associated with a application, you might lose that. You might have other things that's not working anymore. So even though you've got all these MSI files and they're typically updates or installation files, and they're located, let's see, where's this one located? The details. It's actually in C Windows Installer. Okay, so C Windows Installer. Where was it? Installer. It's probably even a hidden file, hidden section. But you can see there's a whole heap of MSI files, and they're associated with your programs that's installed on your computer. Windows features, even your Office, okay? But let's talk about this picture now, okay? So this is the life cycle of a piece of software. Typically, there's a preparation stage. Obviously, for us, if we're going to deploy software, we have to download the MSI file. We need to put it on a network location that's accessible by the computers that are going to be installing it, because we can't put it on our C drive and expect those computers to be able to access our C drive, can we? We need to put it in a share, and the people who need to install it or execute it must have at least the read and execute permissions to that share. Okay. We obviously then create a group policy object that deploys the software. We apply it to somewhere on the Active Directory. We do our scoping with the filtering and targeting and so forth. And then we actually deploy it. And we can deploy in one or two ways. We can do what's called publish, or we can assign. Okay? Even just by the language, you know that publish is probably not as strict as assign, isn't it? So, for example, if I publish a newspaper, you don't have to buy it, but if you choose to buy it, it's available, right? But if I assign you a student ID, it's not like you have any choice to it. That's your student ID, isn't it? Whether you like or not, that's yours. Okay, so with the software deployment, it's the same thing. There's some software which you publish, which means it's available on the network. You want to install it because you want to use it, you install it, but no problems. Some software which is assigned. What does that mean? That means I make it available. It's assigned to you or your computer. It means your computer must install it. Okay? It must be installed. So that's the deployment phase. Obviously, in the lifecycle of a piece of software, I've got this software 1.0. Okay, that's good. It's working fine. But obviously, time passes and now there's a better version. Lots of more improvements, more gadgets, more features, and so forth. Less bugs, hopefully. Okay, more patch, instead of patching it with all these service pack, there's a completely new version. So in this case, because we've actually deployed it with group policy, we can actually use group policy to also update it, update that software that's already on the computer with a newer version. Okay, and then finally, what if this software, we choose to move on to a different software. Okay, let's say this software we've been using for the last 5 years, it's not really ideal now. If there's a new piece of software that does a better job or has these features, and is whatever reason, maybe the licensing was too expensive for that piece of software, and now this piece of software is actually free. Why am I still using this one? So instead of actually you going off to every computer and manually uninstalling each of these software, because hey, guess what? If you actually stop, if you don't pay for the licensing agreement for a potential software and you don't install it, you could potentially find yourself in trouble or your company in trouble. So with group policy, again, we can choose to actually remove that software that's deployed by group policy from the computers, okay? So, and use it to remove it. So how Windows Installer enhances software distribution. So we talked about how in order to deploy the software, it has to be an MSI, okay? What does that mean? That means that if you have an exe file that's like setup.exe for a particular software, you can't use it. But you know what? You can actually turn this exe file into an MSI file by downloading a tool. Okay, and you can actually build a MSI package from it. So Windows Installer Service fully automates the software installation and configuration process. It can be used to modify or repair an existing installation, application installation. The Windows Installer package contains information about installing and uninstalling the program. It has an MSI extension and any external files it needs. It has a summary information about the application, and it has a reference to an installation point. So the benefits of using a Windows installer is that you can do custom installations and you can customize it. It's resilient application, meaning that when we actually, like I said, accidentally delete some of the files that's needed by that program, it actually self-heals by repairing itself from the original MSI file. And we could do a clean removal. You know how it is sometimes when you install a program, when you uninstall it, you sometimes leave behind files, leave behind artifacts. You know, not necessarily as clean as possible, but with an MSI file package, it supports clean removal. We spoke about what's the difference between assigning and publishing software. So when we assign software during computer configuration, they get it. Okay. They get it. They get it during startup. When we publish a software, the software you might even get a shortcut link on the desktop, but when you actually double click on that shortcut, it actually installs it for you at that point. Or it could be just in there in the add and remove programs area. It's available to be installed. Okay, but it's not actually installed on your local system at that point. We can also publish software using extension activation. We can also assign software during user configuration. So we can assign during computer or user. Okay. And we talked about the lifecycle. So for example, we've got a different version. We could do a mandatory upgrade, which means that no one should be using the older version at all. So all installations will be upgraded. Okay. We can do an optional upgrade where this upgrade is available. Again, a bit like publishing this upgrade. And if some people choose to upgrade, some people choose to keep on using the old computer. So this is what's called an optional upgrade. And then a selective upgrade could be that the administrator, instead of in this second option, the user chooses to upgrade or not. In this third option, the administrator chooses who gets the upgrade, who doesn't. Maybe for our company, we've bought 25 licenses for this new product, but we've got 60 users. Maybe we don't upgrade everyone. We just upgrade those people who really need it. You need it, we upgrade yours. You don't need it, we don't upgrade yours. The users don't select, the administrator selects themselves here. Okay? The difference between optional and selective upgrade is who chooses. All right, guys, so that's the end of the PowerPoint. Like I said, before I see you next week, your aim should be getting yourself on your assignment to the end of the group policy section. Okay? And obviously, if you want a progress check, I've got a list here. I'm not going to put it on the board this week, but I've got a list of people who need to do overtime and some people who actually can get a day off because they're so far ahead. Okay, you can see there's a longer list this week because every week a new target gets added, doesn't it? So obviously, besides getting what you needed to be done from last week, you also need to get the next one. So if you're on this list, it means you need to get some work done to actually get caught up, to be, to be on target, or try to be getting ahead of target. Okay, so we'll leave it there, guys, and we'll start working.